the food on your plate has a secret. Hidden inside the bread, the chocolate, the meat are the fingerprints of one of the world's most influential, nearly invisible empires. An empire with more revenue than many of the world's countries. An army of over 155,000 employees operating in 70 countries. This private kingdom has refined the art of being everywhere and nowhere all at once. And they do it by mastering 4 levers of structural power. That company is called Cargill. Think about your last meal. A sandwich, a soda, a steak. You know the brand names. You recognize the logos, but you don't know the name behind the ingredients. The name that has a hand in the salt, the starches, the oils, and the proteins that form much of the foundation of the global food supply. That is by design. This is the story of Cargill, the largest private company in the United States, controlled by one of the world's most private families for over 150 years. How did they achieve this scale? How did they become the invisible architecture that underpins much of how the world eats? To understand, you must learn the 4 levels of power Cargill mastered to influence the global flow of food, storage, logistics, information, and finance. This is the blueprint of structural power. The year is 1865. The American Civil War is over. The nation is exploding westward. With new railroads comes a new opportunity, not just to build a nation, but to feed it. In this moment, a man named William Wallace Cargill makes a move. It's not glamorous. He buys a single wooden grain warehouse at the end of a railroad line in Conover, Iowa. But inside that simple purchase was a world-changing insight. Here's the part that is often missed. W. Cargill understood you don't need to own the farms to gain leverage over the food system. You only need to control the choke points after the harvest. A farmer can grow wheat, but that wheat is worthless if it can't get to market. Cargill became that link. As the railroads expanded, he followed, building a network of grain elevators that stood like castles on the prairie. He bought grain from farmers when they had to sell and moved it east. This is a critical distinction. This wasn't farming. It was arbitrage, executed through logistics. And W. Cargill was obsessed with an operational edge. He implemented steam-moored conveyor belts. He used the telephone to get market data faster than competitors who were still reliant on the telegraph. He was building an empire of efficiency. But a business becomes a dynasty through family. When Cargill's daughter married John Macmillan, it forged the Cargill-Macmillan clan, the same family that retains control of the majority of the company to this day. After W. Cargill died, the company nearly collapsed under a mountain of debt. It was his son-in-law, John Macmillan Sr., who saved it. In doing so, he burned a new culture into the company's soul. Ruthless fiscal discipline, strategic patience, and above all, extreme privacy. This secrecy, this ability to operate away from public scrutiny, would become one of its greatest assets. But how they built the empire came down to mastering one choke point after another. It all started with their first lever of power. A grain elevator is more than just a building. In the right hands, it's a time machine. A farmer is a price taker. They are compelled to sell their crop when the harvest comes in. At that moment, supply is at its peak and prices are often at their lowest. They are at the mercy of the calendar. But a company with massive storage capacity like Cargill is under no such pressure. They can buy enormous quantities of cheap grain at harvest. And then wait. Their colossal warehouses can hold millions of bushels, turning a perishable, seasonal crop into a stable, year-round financial asset. The owner of the warehouse, the owner of that time machine, gains significant leverage over market timing. They can hold their inventory, waiting for a drought on another continent. A geopolitical disruption, a poor harvest somewhere else, And then when supply tightens and prices rise, they sell. This is the foundational power of the choke point. By the 1940s, Cargill had honed this to a science. They could unload an entire train car of grain in just 4 minutes. This efficiency wasn't just about speed. It was a tool for market dominance. The ability to move volume at that velocity gave them a structural advantage few could match. Storing a significant portion of the world's food was the first step. Next, they had to master moving it. This is the mechanism that scaled their power from national to global. The original strategy never changed. It was scaled globally and applied to every corner of the food system. The goal to profit from a commodity's entire journey, from its origin to its final destination. And they did it by achieving dominance with 3 more levers. First, weapon 2, logistics as arteries. After perfecting storage, Cargill focused on movement. They didn't want to rely on someone else's infrastructure. So they built their own aquatic highways, designing powerful tug-barge hybrids to command America's rivers. Today, that has evolved into a massive, privately controlled logistics network. Cargill commands a chartered fleet of hundreds of massive ocean vessels. They move over 200 million tons of commodities across the seas every year. On land, they pioneered the unit train. Over 100 dedicated grain cars, moving in a continuous, hyper-efficient loop from the heartland to coastal ports. This integrated network of ships, barges, and trains provides them near unmatched structural leverage over the global food supply. When a drought hits or a conflict breaks out, they can route flows of grain, soy, and sugar, often faster than public institutions can react. They operate as one of the planet's primary circulatory systems for food. Now watch how this physical control gets amplified. This lever of power allows Cargill to profit from the physical movement of goods across the globe, capturing value at each step. But moving food is one thing. Knowing where to move it before anyone else is the next weapon. Long before Silicon Valley monetized big data, Cargill was in the business of information arbitrage. The company understood a brutal truth. In commodity markets, knowing something minutes, hours, or days before your rival is a game-winning advantage. Here's why this matters. Commodity prices are determined by future expectations of supply and demand. Any new information, a weather forecast, a crop disease report, a policy change, can instantly shift that price. The first to act on new information is positioned to profit, while everyone else is forced to react to the new market price. The loser is the one who gets the information last. This is almost always the farmer at the beginning of the chain and often the consumer at the end. They operate with a time delay, making decisions based on old data, while players like Cargill trade on the future. As early as the 1920s, Cargill bought competitors, just to acquire their private communication systems. They built their own grain testing labs to know the quality and value of a crop, with more precision than the farmer who grew it. This advantage is not necessarily illegal. It's structural. It is born from decades of capital investment in creating a private intelligence network that spans the globe. Building a comparable system would require billions of dollars and a physical presence in dozens of countries. A barrier to entry that is almost impossible to overcome. Today, their traders in Minneapolis, Geneva, and Singapore have a near real-time satellite-level view of global supply and demand. They can analyze rainfall in Ukraine, project soybean yields in Brazil, and track animal feed demand in China, often with more speed and accuracy than governments. This power was demonstrated during the Great Grain Robbery of the 1970s. The Soviet Union, facing a catastrophic harvest failure, needed to buy staggering amounts of foreign grain without causing prices to skyrocket. Cargill, using its superior intelligence network, was a key participant in the secret sales, profiting enormously while the public and even elements of the U.S. government were caught by surprise. Mastering information provides a critical edge, allowing the company to anticipate market shifts before they happen. Now for the final weapon, the one that turns global volatility into a consistent revenue stream. Farming is inherently risky. Weather, pests, and wild price swings can wipe out a year's work in an instant. Cargill turned that risk into a profit center. They became masters of complex financial tools like futures, options, and derivatives. In simple terms, this is how they are positioned to remain profitable within the system's inherent instability. Hedging, for example, allows Cargill to lock in a price for a commodity months before it's even harvested. It's a shield against volatility. While a small farmer can be bankrupted by a single price crash,